interesting because I know nothing about this.
I heard it since my class, but
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Tonight is April 26, 2016, and this is a business meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. If I could ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If I could ask you, as I said, if we could remain standing, I want to have us take a moment of silence for Ms. Joanne Fitz, who is a longtime PE teacher and volleyball coach in the district. I personally didn't have the opportunity to meet her, but from what I've heard, she is very beloved and will be very missed. So if we could have a moment, please have a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Mrs. Avanzato?
Here.
Mr. Blasbog?
Here.
Mrs. Clarkin? Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. McGoffin? Here. Mrs. Hell? Here. Student Representative?
here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you could please call the calendar.
On Wednesday, May 4th, there will be a CLAC meeting at 6:30 at Davisville Academy. And Tuesday, May 10th, there is a school committee work session at 7 p.m. at the high school.
Thank you. And we have a number of presentations and recognitions on the agenda for this evening. So, Dr. O'Shea, if you'd like to.
Sure. Before we get started with that, I just the first recognition I'd like to make is something a very great achievement for North Kingstown High School and for the district as a whole. I think you all know that in the past we have won U.S. News and World Report silver medals for our high school. Well, we just received word this week that this is the third time North Kingstown High School receives one of these awards. And a lot of times when you have, rankings or these kinds of awards that come to the high schools and to any schools, a lot of times they're from different organizations and they're based on some different things. This one is based on the reading and math proficiency, the overall student performance, the disadvantaged student performance, which I think is a really nice piece of this, that they look at, the gap between those students who may not be, as economically advantaged as others. So they might be eligible for free reduced lunch and see how those students are doing. College readiness performance, which is basically another way of saying how many students are getting involved in advanced coursework. And in North Kingstown High School, we have a very high percentage of students that take AP coursework, for instance. So those things all factored in make us one of the top 5 high schools in Rhode Island. And that is quite an achievement. Like I said, it's the third time we do that. So, congratulations to Dr. Biancieri and the high school, but congratulations to all of the staff and students of all of our schools, because obviously, we're all moving in that direction, and it takes a lot of work at all levels, including with Olympic teams from the middle school to turn into U.S. News and World Report silver medal winners once they get to the high school. So congratulations to the whole school community on this great achievement. It's a wonderful thing for our district. I also have, I want to make the announcement tonight on our agenda is the retirement of Mr. Ed Ferrario, principal of Stony Lane Elementary School. Beloved principal, another award-winning principal. He was the Rhode Island Principal of the Year just recently, and the principal of, that brought blue ribbon status to Stony Lane. So he will certainly be missed. He's got some big shoes to fill, and we wish him the best going forward. Dr. Humbert, a couple of items?
I do. We have some further recognitions.
I had the pleasure of attending an awards ceremony yesterday at the State House, and that was for the 2016 Rhode Island Personal Finance Challenge. And we had, this was in celebration of financial literacy. We had a team that was second in the state out of 76 teams from 8 schools. And I'd like to recognize the 4 students that were on that team. They were Aiden Carell, Ashley Gray, Clara Crawford, and Evan Urban. And so they placed second. So they had a huge trophy that's going next to the one they won last year. So we're very proud of them. And also we have some recognitions in our art department. First of all, we have Caitlin Brown, who was awarded second place in this year's 2016 high school art competition. This was sponsored by Jack Reed, and her work will hang in his Rhode Island office for a year. So that's an honor. And we also had Lillian Steinway Adler, who was awarded second place in the state of Rhode Island for the Young American Creative Patriotic Art Award. And this contest brought her a little cash prize. Her work will be featured in the VFW Auxiliary magazine and on their website. And finally, we had a few students who were chosen to be showcased this year at the URI Feinstein Providence Campus Arts and Culture and at the memorial. They are Jillian Mobley, Faith Leonardo, Kimberly Coronado, and Sarah LaValle, and Chelsea Olson and Maddie McCarthy.
Thank you. And also, I'd like to, we're going to recognize individually with some certificates the members of the Wickford Middle School Science Olympiad team. They were awarded third place in the Rhode Island Science Olympiad with an individual bronze in the Crime Busters event, a bronze in Mission Impossible, and a bronze in Right to Do It. And so I have certificates for each of you. It doesn't look like everyone's here because I have more certificates than I have people in front of me, but I'll call your names and you can come on.
So good evening again, everyone. We have Coach LaPasta Frazier here tonight, a multi-award-winning coach on this the Olympic career of hers. You know, I want to thank her for her years of commitment. She has also announced her retirement this year, so we're looking for a new Olympics coach, everybody. Thank you very much for everything that you've done and for the acclaim that you brought to the district and to Wickford Middle School and our science program. It means a lot. Can you tell us about the team and the experience?
I don't want to, yeah.
Stand over here.
Thank you. Well, this year marked the 20th year that Wickford's competed, and our third place finish was absolutely phenomenal given the fact that we were a very, very young team this year. We only had a few returnees to the team. What was also very impressive was their engineering skill. These kids could build. They would come up to the third floor of Wickford Middle School on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, and they would start to build. I was just telling Mrs. Arusso that I could have left the building and come back an hour later, and they'd still be just working away, building their different mechanisms. We built things like gliders, Rube Goldberg devices, air trajectories, I didn't say the gliders. What else did we build, kids? Oh, the bridges. Oh, and the car. Thank you very much. And they did spectacular in all of their engineering feats. So we'd like to recognize them now. And let's see where the certificates are. Emma Chin. Annie Etchels. Owen Embry, Jack Belmore, Dana Bernier, Hannah Cahill, Elena Minerick, by the way, Elena designed and drew our shirts. So she's not only a talented scientist, she's a talented artist as well. And Alex Ang. And we'd like to thank North Kingstown and Wickford Middle School and Mr. Merkel for their support in this program. Without them, we wouldn't be able to get this done. I'd also like to thank my husband, Mike Frazier, and Raina Aruso, a brand new teacher in the district, for all of their help.
Thank you all. And you're welcome to stay for all of the school committee meeting if you'd like.
So next item on our agenda is the report back from the NESDEC report with our demographic analysis and educational facility best use study. So if I could have you folks come to the microphone and give your presentation. And for those who don't know, the purpose of this study is it was commissioned so that we can get a good idea of what the population, housing trends, and needs of the district are going forward, so that we can work on our long-term plan and see where we need to go. So thank you, folks.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is John Kennedy, and I'm with NESDEC, and my colleague is Anna Cross, and we, along with some other members of the NESDEC team, worked on the project. First of all, I would like to compliment the school department for engaging in a forward-thinking process for planning. To be honest, we don't always see that. And so it's a very important piece. Secondly, I would like to thank the members of the school administration, school staff members, and also members of the community for the assistance that they have provided us as we've moved through the project. Tremendous cooperation and tremendous enthusiasm and pride in the school system. So that was very, very nice to see. A little bit about NESDEC first. We have been in operation for over 65 years. The organization emanated out of the Harvard School of Education, and we are a nonprofit. And our primary function, which is one that Anna and I both enjoy a great deal, is to try to help districts solve problems. And so we are involved in a number of different projects for districts. We do executive searches. We're also involved to a degree with strategic planning. And we also, on an annual basis, I believe this year we'll do 280 sets of enrollment projections for districts throughout New England. And so that's, we have 250 member districts. Of those, 200 have been members for over 10 years. So we are pleased with that. Now, other functions, and this gets us to where we are this evening, our purpose this evening, we do demographic studies for districts, and we are also involved with facility studies, facility best use studies. So that's where we became involved with the North Kingstown district. And so at this point, we're going to run through just some brief introduction in terms of the project, and then we will move on from there. So first of all, we did enter an agreement with the school department, and the idea was that we would provide a demographic study of the community, and also that would be coupled with a facility best use study. And obviously, the two go together. The demographics in terms of what the community's demographic outlook and growth outlook is for the future certainly plays a role with regard to any decision making with regard tied to future use of school buildings. With regard to this, we will provide information to you, and hopefully what this will do will be to provide you with an opportunity to look down the road a distance and see where you believe what makes sense over the long term. But in the short term, it also will give you an opportunity to say, okay, given what we know with regard to the long term, that will affect our decision making in the short term with regard to certain buildings and activities that we might engage in with regard to capital improvements and so on. Now, the information that we gain from the information that we have gained eventually at the end of the presentation this evening will lead us to a set of options, and those options will provide you with both a near-term and long-term approach or possibilities that you may consider in terms of actions to take with regard to best use. Okay, hang on right there. All right. With regard to the options, just a final point, we did consider a number of options, some of which we brought forward and others which we did not bring forward because A, they did not provide sufficient capacity, or B, they did not provide sufficient support for academic programming, or in some cases both. Okay. All right. Now, in terms of the demographic analysis, all right, when we look at demographics, we are very interested in a number of items, but one of the most significant has to do with births. And obviously, those children, for the most part, born this year will be your kindergarten students 5 years down the road. So births play a very significant role in a district's enrollment. Now, in terms of births and birth history, it is important to note, and you can see on the slide there, that during the time period from 2001, there we go, to 2008, the births in the community averaged 272. And then from 2009 until 2014, the births were 208. So there was a significant decline in births over that time period. And obviously, that had a major impact on your enrollment and your enrollment decline. Also, we take a look at age cohorts, And the age cohort that we look at is from the Census Bureau, the under age 18 cohort. And in 2010, that totaled 6,332 children under the age of 18 in the community. However, the Census Bureau put out an estimate in 2014, and they indicated at that time that the number had dropped under 18 to 6,171. So this was a decline of 61 persons. Look at the other side of the story, however. During the same time period, the 65-year and over population was estimated to have increased by 240 persons. So you saw that change take place. All right. Now, on the national level, speaking of the 65 and over population, the boomers, we've all heard about them. They are turning 65 at the rate nationally of 10,000 a day. And that will continue for the next 13 years. Okay? So there is a question mark out there which is now beginning to be answered. What will the boomers do with regard to housing? What we are seeing statistically is that many of the boomers, especially not after this winter, but after last winter, the year before, have thought that it might be a good idea to downsize and move to a condominium or to apartments where they would not necessarily be shoveling that snow again. And so this is a major factor, not just the snow, but also making life a little bit easier for them. And so the boomers are on the move. And many of them are downsizing to either apartments or condominiums. And the question becomes when they leave, what are they vacating? And in most cases, it is 3 or 4 bedroom empty nester homes. And the next question is, who will buy those? And in many cases, obviously, it will be families with children. And so this is an important factor that we are tracking. In talking to the realtors here in this community, many of them have indicated that they are hearing that the boomers are going to be moving, that some of them have been moving, but that in many instances they are still waiting for home prices to uptick additionally. And in that way, they will gain more equity from the sale of their home. In terms of national and regional factors...
Excuse me? Sorry, one second. We just had a question.
Sure.
I was wondering, in comparison, you said that the baby boomers are turning 65 at the rate of 10,000 per day. So in comparison, how many children are being born per day?
Per day, I would not, but the birth rate, I'll get into that in a moment.
Okay.
All right. And actually, I wanted to mention this. We will be happy to answer any questions as we move through it. Some of the things that we'll be talking about will be answered as we go through, but I will definitely be responding to that. Okay. And then the other piece here is another factor or regional factor is that the New England Economic Partnership, of which we are a member, they have 2 meetings a year that are held at the Federal Reserve Building in Boston. We try to attend those meetings because they provide a great deal of information. And they are indicating that the New England regional economy is continuing to improve. And growth rates in 2015 were higher than any year after the 2008-2009 recession. I'll be glad to answer questions when we...
I just have, it relates exactly to this.
Sure.
The next point, which is, but what's happening to the labor force participation rate, right? Because unemployment is a function of jobs and participation. And
right.
Participation has been going down in the region.
Right.
Right, because the central question really here is that saying that the housing market's going to get squeezed, or we just have a lot of people who are vacating the labor market around here?
Well, what's happening, based on what we have seen from research, is two things, and your point is very well taken. There are two factors here that are affecting the unemployment rate. One factor is the fact that there are, because the boomers are starting to retire, and because some of the younger folks have moved to other parts of the country, there is a diminishing size in terms of the labor workforce as compared to 8 to 10 years ago. But the second piece is that according to the projections from the New England Economic Partnership, and based on information that they have provided, Rhode Island has gone from a state which was way behind the rest of New England in terms of job growth to a state which is now slightly ahead of the other New England states in terms of job growth. Key point, however, this is not a huge job growth situation. It is improving, and the New England Economic Partnership indicates that it will continue to improve, but at a relatively slow rate. Are we going to see the 11% unemployment rate that existed in Rhode Island back 8 years ago? The answer is no. Are we going to see job growth continue? Yes. Are we going to see unemployment at approximately, right now you're at 5.6%. Are we going to see it at about that level? Yes. Maybe decline slightly from that point. Okay? What's the factor? Obviously, the more boomers that retire, the fewer people that are looking for jobs, and so that helps to keep the unemployment rate up. Okay. Does that respond to your question, sir?
It does. I just make the point that part of the birth rate is a function of families who move in who economically can sustain a household, and so if the labor force participation is growing, even if the economy looks like it's squeezed in the labor market, they're not exactly looking to start families at any rate earlier. In fact, the trend has continually been later, right? Which has, as you noted, impacts throughout the cycle.
Right. That's absolutely, we're in absolute agreement with that. Now, in terms of other factors, that brings us to a major factor, and this one has to do with the millennials. And the millennials were born between 1982 and 2004. Interestingly, and this is a surprise to a lot of people, it was to me when I first heard it, the millennial generation has more members than did the boomers. However, in their 20s, they, because of a number of factors, one of which was the recession, or Great Recession as it's referred to, they were much later in making decisions to marry. And when they did, they were oftentimes, as was just mentioned, slower to move into a situation of child rearing and expanding their families. Why? In many instances, they had high college debt. And beyond that, they were dealing with an economy which was really experiencing a decline that we had not seen since the Great Depression. So, a major question out there. Many of the millennials, now the oldest of them are 33, 34. Many of them are considering having families. The question is, because they are a larger number than even the boomers, the question is, will their family size ultimately be meaning, will they have a great impact in terms of births as they turn into their early 30s? And that is a major question mark. The National Center for Health Statistics has indicated that they think that the number of births among the millennials will rise significantly over the next several years because, remember, they're looking at their 30s and they're saying, if we are going to have a family, this is the time we have to do it. And the second factor that has been mentioned, every single time, whether it be after the World War II or whether it be during the Great Depression, every single time where we have had a major economic downturn, there has been a very significant decline in the birth rate. Makes sense? And so the question now is, what will they do? And the answer to that question is still unknown because there is still a long line that has not turned 30. Okay? I don't know if this rings true to you, but the millennials are folks who tend to like to live near cities. They tend to, the families early on are renting as opposed to buying larger homes. They are typically involved in purchasing condos and having two-bedroom condos with a child there. So they're not going out and buying the McMansion at this particular point, nor maybe will they or will they not. We do not know that. Okay. Now, data that we have used in the analysis, we took a look at HUD permit data, and from 1998 until 2006, North Kingstown was averaging 109 permits per year. In 2015, there were 46 single-family permits issued. So it was an uptick from the recession days, but it is nowhere near at this point reaching the level that the community was at during the boom period. Okay? Now, we have been in touch with the planning office, and we have received great assistance from them, and they provided us with this information concerning projects that have been approved in this community and are currently under construction. As you look at those, you see some minor subdivisions, and then you also see this one, the Reynolds Farm Phase 1. It is 80 age-restricted apartments, 41 single-family three-bedroom units with casitas, plus 24 Main Street two-bedrooms, 6 Main Street cottage-style two-bedrooms, and 12 cottage-style two-bedroom units. That is a major project, and that is Phase 1 of the project. Okay? All right. What you see here is the total number of single-family units that are currently under construction. That's 110. And so that is a very significant uptick from where the community was at several years back. And also, apartment units, these are all age-restricted. Under normal circumstances back in the 80s or 90s, we would have said, well, if it's age-restricted, that's not going to have an impact on school enrollments. However, based on what we said about the boomers, there is a very distinct possibility that some of these will be rented by boomers who will be vacating 3 or 4 bedroom homes within the community. And you can see also 36 duplex units are under construction. So total construction, as you can see, is fairly significant, and you're looking at over 200 units under construction presently. Okay. These are projects that are in the approval process, and we have a listing primarily of minor subdivisions initially. Next. And then these are major subdivisions. And of the major subdivisions, Namcook is an important one because it has 104 condo or apartment units, and 56 being one bedroom, but 48 being two bedrooms. What that implies is that they certainly could be rented by a starter family with using one of the bedrooms for a child. Another one that is a major project is the Preserve at Rolling Green, 106 units, and they have townhouse units, duplexes, 20 single families, okay, and those are 3 bedrooms. And then also the residences at Sawmill, 245 apartments, 196 of which are 2 bedrooms. So that is very important. And we get to the next page, or the next slide, and here is Reynolds Farm Phase 2. $152 single-family units, 3 bedrooms, 45 with casitas. Okay, so I think that, given that, you can see the range here that we are looking at, and it's a fairly significant range. Single family approximately 266 to 281. The reason for the differential is because they, excuse me, some of them are saying it's going to be either a duplex or a single family. So that has not been determined yet. They're still in the planning stages. Duplexes, approximately 162 units. The duplexes will have at least 2 bedrooms. And then apartments, anywhere between 491 and 595. Now, the reason for that is primarily Namcook. Namcook may be condos or it may be apartments, and there are 104 that are being proposed there. So that could go either way. And the same is true with the townhouses and condos. That's a possibility as well, because there is, again, some undecided proposals out there as to whether they're going to go with condos or whether they're going to go with apartments. Okay? But if you take a look and think of all of those, that is very, very significant growth that is in the proposal line within the community. Other factors that are important. What's happening in the existing home market? Very important factor is that with regard to in 2015, the average single-family home sales totaled 285. And the average for the previous 6 or 7 years was 222. There's an uptick. And take a look at your home prices. 325 in 2015 was the median price. And the average 6 years previously, for 6 years previous, was 298. So your housing values are on the way up. We are noting, however, that although single-family volume and median prices have increased, as is the case with no home permits, the current existing home sales fall below that the town experienced during the housing boom. In the housing boom, you were at 353 per year. Last year was 285. And the housing boom sales peaked at 395. Okay? What does this tell us, though? The important thing this tells us, prices are still rising, and what are people still doing? They are still buying. And so that is a key indicator that there is still a continued potential for uptick in the housing market. And also, when you look at the number, builders don't line up to construct or present proposals if they think they're not going to sell the houses. Okay. Now, what do realtors tell us? They said that in North Kingstown there has been an increase in sales activity during the past several months, and it is occurring primarily at the lower end of the market. That's an important thing to note. Who's buying those? Who buys the homes at the lower end of the market? For the most part, millennials are buying them, and they are people who are looking to start a family. Or they maybe already have a family and living in an apartment or a condo. And those interviewed said that reasonably priced homes are often selling rather quickly. On the market a couple weeks, 3 weeks, gone. During the housing downturn, it was 6 months to a year. And finally, they note that some of the boomers, and we already mentioned this, are looking for prices to maybe rise a little bit more. Okay. Last demographic factors that come into play, the New England Economic Partnership forecast indicates that Rhode Island's unemployment rate declined faster than NEEP had previously estimated. We, with this gentleman, Mr. Jones, had just talked about this. And so there were a couple of factors that came into play. Increased jobs, but also fewer people looking for jobs, okay, because of the boomers' retirement. And next, the New York Times on March 16, 2016, noted in the business section, the Quonset Business Park recently reached a milestone surpassing 10,000 employees. My most recent information tells me that it is now up at around 11, and that we were in contact with Quonset as recently, just to check back this afternoon, and we always do this to contact the realtors and check back, and what we found was that there is going to be continued expansion at Quonset, and they are estimating that there will be several families that will, at least be looking at properties close by their workplace. And
I would just like to note that I did not ask him to say that. We didn't even know the connection until we talked about it after the report was final.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My colleague, Don Kennedy, we're not related, but he does the enrollment projections for us. He brought me the article from the New York Times and said, hey, this is tied to our project. And then I had no idea. And so I was just on a phone conversation with Mary, and I said, oh, geez, and you folks have a business park there. And so anyway, that's how that materialized. But it is an important factor. I don't think I am aware of any community in Rhode Island that has been featured in the business section of the New York Times. So, okay, next. Lastly, the school district has implemented full-day kindergarten, and that's an important piece, and that tends to draw folks to the schools because full-day K is definitely a factor in best practice for education in research. And so, therefore, that's a factor that would draw, and also the Technology Robotics Careers Program, which is at the high school, which has just been recognized as a leader in the country. So that's a pretty strong statement. Both of these are highly positive factors which draw people to schools. Okay. So, demographic analysis. We are saying now we cannot predict exactly when the community is going to experience growth. However, the moderate acceleration in housing and the increase in new construction coupled with the improving employment situation and the draw of the public schools, make it very likely that the enrollment decline that we have mentioned will be diminished because of these factors, okay? So you had the original piece having to do with the births. Births were clearly down, and that, so the millennials are retiring, births were clearly down. However, these factors, with more people coming into the community and greater numbers of millennials, most likely, moving into starter homes, there is a likelihood that births will increase. Okay? And so, what do we recommend? It's going to be very important down the road for the district to maintain first of all, to track these, an annual check on births, residential permits, existing home sales, as well as any other economic indicators. And it's also going to be very important as you make decisions, we believe, as you make decisions with regard to school utilization, to make sure that you maintain an adequate capacity cushion. The last thing that any district wants to do is put themselves in a position where they make an adjustment with regard to school utilization and then 4 or 5 years later have to go back to a school which might have been put out of commission. Okay, that can be, I think you all know, the difficulties that are incurred in trying to bring a school up to code when you reopen it. So those are some concerns that we have. Okay. Now, what do the enrollments look like? The enrollment projections, first of all, the history. And important to note in the history, my wife always tells me, John, please do not read all of these to the people when you do a presentation. And so I certainly will not do that. But if you take a look at the K through 12 history, you can see the starting point, all right, and then you can see the ending point. And as you look at that with regard to the history, you can see that the enrollment decline was almost 700. And so that is an important decline that occurred during the period of the last 10 years. However, look over here. And you will note what was the birth rate in 2000, 293. And then you take a look here, 205. Now, you think of that over a 10-year period of time, births had a decline in the birth rate, had a very significant impact on enrollments. All right? Now, where was the decline felt most? It was felt most in the elementary. Okay? The K through 5 enrollment during that last decade declined by 401 students. It was felt least at the high school. Why? Because a decline in births takes 5 years before it even affects the schools. Make sense? So therefore, if a decline occurs in 2000, then the schools won't even feel it until 2004, 2005. And so the decline has been moving its way through the schools. And that's a key point. Okay?
I think one other key point, though, too, is, could you go back to that slide, Mr. Kennedy?
Sure.
There was one really big year of decline, and it was FY13, was 5.1%.
Yeah.
And if you look at the years after that and even prior to that, that was a really, really big year for whatever reason, and we have not, knock on wood, seen a year that big.
Right.
I'm not really sure what the main issues are in that, but I think it's important to note that when we look back in the last maybe 5 years or so, it's that 1 year that is really impacting the overall enrollment decline over the last several years.
That's absolutely correct.
And I just want to make one other point that we've been noticing, and you may get to this later, but when you're looking at a decline from year 2000 to 2010 or to today and talking about elementary schools, we have 2 less elementary schools in the district at this point than we did in 2000.
Okay. Okay. So there has obviously been an impact. Okay. All right. This just is a bar graph which shows the decline. And this is the enrollment projection. And important to understand, we note that the district added a program of full-day K, and the projection takes that into consideration and also takes into consideration the demographic information which we have presented, which would indicate that there is going to be a significant in-migration of school-age children into the community. Okay? So that's a key piece. And with, let's go back to that. And we're projecting a decline will continue. We're projecting it will be 393 students. And where will it occur primarily? Well, let's think of what we just talked about. And we talked about the impact of those births back in 2000. And 2000 is 16 years ago. So the biggest decline that we anticipate occurring will be at the high school, okay, over the time period. And the high school we're projecting will decline by approximately 220 students over a 10-year period. And grades 6 through 8 will decline by about 112, and the elementary will only decline by approximately 52. So that decline is several factors coming into play. The full-day K, another piece that Anna is very up on is pre-K, and most communities are expanding pre-K, and it's likely that that is a distinct possibility here down the road. Okay? All right, that's another bar graph. This just shows you graphically what the history and the projections look like. And you can see that it is a slow, gradual decline, not as steep as you experienced during the last decade. This is an important point. K enrollment versus births. Look what happened during this time period. K enrollment actually slightly increased above births. Why? Most likely because the district was involved with a full-day K program. Okay, that's a factor that comes into play because parents are aware that research is beginning to show that this is a very positive thing for students. Okay.
What's that actual gap? So,
pardon me?
Exceeds it, but exceeds it by very little, right?
Right. But if you take a look at where it was.
Well, right, but it exceeds it previous before when we didn't have full-day K too. So, I mean, it just seems to me it's hard to say whether it's an outlier yet or not.
Well, we haven't said that it absolutely is, but all of our experience going from district to district indicates that when there is a movement to full-day K, the K enrollments have a tendency to increase.
Well, no, I would agree with you. I'm just saying you've seen the trend before 5 years earlier without full-day K. So
right.
My point is simply whether that trend line is going to keep going this way or revert to what it did after the last time it bumped up.
Right. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. These are the K enrollments, and these are the births. And so there was a significant gap during these times. And then there was this point, and then a continued gap. And so that is a point that is valid. The only thing we have added to this, and we don't have this statistically to mention, but we do have it experience-wise, is that most districts that we have worked with have had an increase in K enrollment after they've gone to full day.
But you said that this statistic or this chart shows the impact of full day K, yet the year that full day K was implemented, which is FY16, the current year, isn't on this.
Right, but it was announced, well, this was 2010, 2015, but it was announced that the district was moving in this direction, and this is viewed as a factor that causes people to come into a community and want to put their children into the schools. And that's we find that in lots of communities. And there was an increase in this particular year with regard to the K population that would have, that is, relatively significant. And so therefore this is K this year was 217 students. And so that's a significant point. It was 205 last year and 211, but there has been an uptick, and we would advise that you should anticipate that there will be a continued uptick based on our experience, not based on a statistical analysis. And this is just a summary of some of the permitting and information that we have referenced and use in order to just add to our statistical computations. These are the enrollments for each of the schools. We did a school-by-school projection for each. And those, it's important to understand that those are less likely to be as accurate as the full district enrollments because we're dealing with a smaller group, and therefore the numbers can sometimes be off. Statistically, it's a possibility that they may be off somewhat. Okay. And then we get into a capacity analysis.
Can we just summarize, though, one point?
Sure.
From the last slides is simply that at no point in the out years, though, do you project any school to have higher enrollment than they do now.
That is actually not the case in terms of not higher than what they're. Well, let's go back.
Yeah, I haven't seen a school that has.
Right. All right. Let's keep going back.
What about Quidnessett?
Yeah. Okay. All right. There's one.
Okay. Yeah. Glad I asked that.
Okay. That's the only one.
Forest Park.
All right. And Forest. Forest for
Fishing Cove.
Fishing Cove.
Not
Because
Forest
this is the 2015-16. Okay.
Can you go back to Quidnessett real quick, please?
Yep. Quidnessett. Yep.
But
considering that there's a projected decline in births, isn't it significant to show even flat enrollment?
Well, versus what you've seen, absolutely. Versus what you've seen, it's over the past 10 years, it's definitely, and we noted that the total decline is projected to be approximately 52 students at the elementary level. So
based on the housing starts analysis and that, obviously the increased enrollments are skewed to the northern part of town, based on where those two schools are. And the southern end is flat or falling. So it's not it's very skewed in terms of how the distribution is
I
across.
believe from what I heard from the planning department that's accurate, yeah. I think it's, some places are developing more rapidly than others, and so it's not geographically equalized. Okay, now we go to the capacity analysis, and Anna's going to take over for a while, and we will explain to you how we go about operating with this.
This is what happens when you follow someone who's much taller. But good evening, everybody. We're going to be looking at capacity analysis of the district, and when we do this, we really look at two issues. Can our school facilities accommodate student enrollment and the instructional as well as programmatic changes that are occurring in the future? So we know that things have changed over the last 40 to 50 years. For example, the basic size for a standard classroom has changed from 500 to 900 square feet. 50 years ago, students were in rows and in desks. Today, they're organized in learning centers, and classrooms have to be flexible to meet the needs of the students. Schools now need to accommodate early childhood programs, such as full day and preschool, fully integrated art and music, an increased demand for technology, serving the needs of all students by providing space for specialists right here. Yep. Take up. And conference spaces to meet with parents and teachers. Nurses must have appropriate private spaces for students. All schools need to be handicapped accessible. Now, transportation needs have changed, security needs have changed. Even the level of storage needed in a school has changed as teachers move to more hands-on equipment and devices that they need. And many of these things are the same kinds of things that happen at middle and high school. More access, more hands-on technology. So all of this is taken into account when we're determining the capacity of a school. Got it? Okay. So when we determine capacity, it's different than how an architect determines capacity. An architect looks at square footage when determining capacity. And they can include everything, including a lobby and various spaces that are not necessarily instructional. But NESDEC considers the spaces available as well as how the spaces are going to meet the programmatic and instructional needs of the students and the staff. So NESDEC uses the terms current operating capacity and planned operating capacity. And the current operating capacity reflects how the building's actually being used, its current use. For example, if there's a converted space that's being used for instruction, those are usually calculated in a current operating capacity. The planned operating capacity is the capacity if best practices are being used to deliver instruction and services for the 21st century. For example, while a school might be currently using a converted space for instruction, the planned operating capacity would be adjusted to reflect that need so that other space can be created that's more appropriate. It might mean taking a classroom offline to accommodate needs that are being met in spaces that are less than ideal. So we adjust for a planned operating capacity to take into account the need to correct deficiencies, provide for core and specialized facilities, provide equity between buildings, and meet compliance issues such as handicapped accessibility. So in general, several themes were identified as we went around to visit schools. In cases where NESDEC made accommodations to the planned operating capacity calculation, it was always sort of to meet the need to create appropriate spaces for delivery of program. So that could include services by specialists like social workers, psychologists, occupational physical therapy, nurses, or instructional support like special ed or resource or ESL. The lack of a core facility, such as a gym, is considered an issue of equity and parity between schools, and those were considered as we moved along as well. So while there were challenges when we went to visit schools, there were also some positive themes that we noted, and I think we should take a moment to sort of acknowledge those. It was obvious to us that the district, and clearly U.S. World News and Report has also noted, that individual schools and the district have made a real commitment to integrating technology, and Wi-Fi connectivity was available in all the schools, and plans were already in place for places where it maybe was variable. Students have access to a wide range of devices, including iPads and Chromebooks and computers, and in our experience in the places that we've been to and districts that we've been to, North Kingstown ranks among the best that we have seen and should be a point of pride for the district. Also, I think to be noted is that every school we went to, we were very impressed with the leadership and the staff that were in schools. Students were very engaged. They were not fazed by two of us walking around with clipboards. They just went right on doing what they were doing and just took it all in stride. So we're going to walk through each school and give you a brief overview of the planned and the operating capacity and some of the challenges that we found in each of the schools. So we'll start with Fishing Cove. So the current operating capacity for Fishing Cove is 440 students, and the planned operating capacity is 388. So how do we get to that place? We get to that number by looking at the spaces available and taking some classrooms offline to accommodate deficiencies that we see. So for instance, Fishing Cove is the only school that currently houses a pre-K to 5 program. It was built in 1957. Its enrollment on October 1 was 323. In terms of its core facility, it's one of two schools that lacks an appropriate gymnasium. We can go to the multi-purpose slide. Keep going. So the multi-purpose room, which is what Fishing Cove has, serves many functions on a daily basis, including as a gymnasium, as an auditorium, as a cafeteria, all of which require that room to be set up and broken down multiple times per day. The administrative and the support staff spaces are somewhat limited, requiring services be provided in shared spaces. Keep going. Systems. And systems such as windows and flooring and room dividers are in need of replacement or attention. So we'll look at Forest Park. We're going to move through these. I apologize for moving quickly, but we know we have many slides, and I don't want to lose anybody along the way. So, and you're familiar with these schools, so this is hopefully not new news. Forest Park has a current operating capacity of 310 students and a planned operating capacity of 284, which was adjusted by reducing one classroom so that specialist spaces could be created. K-5 school, it was built in 1962, and its enrollment as of October 1 was 257. Forest Park is the other school in the district that lacks the gymnasium as part of its core facility. The principal, I thought, had a great word, the cafegimatorium. So we've taken that in other places as well, and it serves a multitude of purposes, including as a gym, as a cafeteria, as an auditorium, and as storage. She brought us through and showed us the dividers that have been put up so that they could create storage in that space. The space for support staff is limited. Conference spaces are used for testing and are also limited. Nursing space is limited. There are handicapped accessibility issues in the building, and parking and traffic concerns were noted as concerns. At Hamilton, the current operating capacity is 431 students, and the planned operating capacity is 431. There is a multi-purpose room, a space at Hamilton that could be taken offline for instruction, but what would have to happen is that alternative spaces would need to be found for those services that are currently in that space. So a K-5 school again, built in 1962 with an addition constructed in 96. And their enrollment as of October 1 was 345. Support staff share spaces for delivery of services. There's a special education program located on site. Your administrative space is also used as a conference space. There were some issues in terms of play space, blacktop needing to be fixed so that there were not accessibility issues for students who were there. And there were some systems issues in terms of windows and parking identified as inadequate. Quidnesset. Quidnesset has a current operating capacity of 383 and a planned operating capacity of 357, which was also adjusted by taking one classroom offline to create space for support services. Built in 1971, and it had an addition constructed in 2000. Their enrollment on October 1 was 294. Some support staff share spaces, occupational and physical therapy, and there may be a need to create additional space for special education programs in the future, and they had some systems issues in terms of windows and doors and dividers in the roof and storage. So those were things that they noted. Stony Lane. I don't want to give anybody whiplash here as we go through, but Stony Lane has a current operating capacity of 461. And this is one school where the planned operating capacity increased a little bit because there is one classroom that's currently being used for physical therapy, which could be reclaimed as an instructional space, but one would then need to find space for physical therapy. It was built in 1971 with an addition constructed in 96, and its enrollment on October 1 was 414. The principal noted the kindergarten classes were full as of August. So as a person who was in charge of that in my previous district, when your kindergarten is full in August, you know that you're going to need something coming down the road for someone else who might walk in the door. So it's important to plan for that. And that their original systems, they had systems issues around some of the original windows and doors and flooring needing replacement. And so they were the only ones that had one classroom currently not in use for instruction that was being used. And John will do the middle and the high school.
Okay. All right, so first of all, as you can tell, we started in the winter. And this was Davisville. And with the, Davisville, as you know, houses grades 6 through 8. It was constructed in 1965. It has 28 interchangeable classrooms, and its enrollment as of October 1 was 534 students. It has when we computed the current operating capacity of 710, and in this particular case, we are using 25 as the class size for middle school and for high school, maximum class size, and 10 for special ed. And so the planned operating capacity, because we did not have to take anything offline to accommodate spaces, instructional spaces, the planned operating capacity is 710. Davisville has, as we said, a pretty good situation in terms of instructional spaces. It has art, music, science rooms, tech ed classrooms, one of which is robotics. It has a couple of computer labs, a couple of world language rooms, and it does have a lecture hall, which we and the building principal view as being outdated. 1965, they constructed lecture halls in lots of buildings. The cafetorium is used also as an auditorium, so to speak, and there is a stage. The lighting and the sound on the stage are described as adequate. Gym, library, adequate. And with regard to the support staff, the only issue really is occasional scheduling issues with the psychologists and some of the other support staff, but it was not a major issue for the school. Administrative space is generally good. There is a shortage of space in the nurses' station, and there may be some effort to adjust that. And the building, and this is important, the building is fully ADA compliant, and so that's a key factor. And the major systems are in pretty good shape with the exception of the windows, which are the originals and are not energy efficient, and I believe there's a plan in place across the district to do some of that replacement over time. Next. And the site and also storage, generally speaking, with the exception of the nurse's office, is viewed as adequate. All right, next we move to Wickford Middle School. It also is grades 6 through 8 attend the school. It was built in 1932, and it had an addition of a gymnasium in 1978, and its October 1 enrollment was 430 students. We did take one classroom offline to accommodate the nurses' space, which is inadequate, and also provide an instructional space or workspace for the social worker, speech therapist, OT-PT. So the POC for the building is 525 as opposed to the COC, which was 550. Okay. Now, just highlights. There are 22 interchangeable grade 6 through 8 classrooms. 20 are full-sized and 2 are smaller. The science rooms at the building are in need of an upgrade. With regard to the core facilities, there is no auditorium. And the cafeteria is used for assemblies and performances, but there is no stage. The remainder of the gymnasium has 2 teaching stations. The library accommodates up to 40 students, so those are acceptable. And then for the administrative offices, the secretarial desks are location. There is inadequate space for the admins to actually work, and it's very, very crowded. The nurses' station is also inadequate and lacks privacy. And there is no exam room. There is no handicapped restroom within the area, and as we mentioned, storage. Now, the support staff, 2 special education rooms are converted restrooms, spaces, and the speech therapist does not have a dedicated space. Now, in terms of technology, I think the key point here is that there is wireless access pretty much throughout the building, and 150 Google Chrome devices are available to the students, and next year all students will be equipped So that's a really positive factor, and the district should be commended for moving in that direction. This is a real plus. I have a 3-year-old grandson who is proficient with an iPad. So this is the wave of the future, no doubt.
Well, you're welcome to move to some of the new housing in North Kingston if you'd like.
Okay. All right. And so next, ADA handicapped access. There is an elevator in the building to the 3 levels. There are ADA compliant restrooms on each floor for the students. However, staff restrooms are in very poor condition, and they are not ADA compliant. They do have the levered interior door handles and the closed-fisted crash bars. However, handicapped access, the next to last bullet, several areas of the building require handicapped citizens to use lifts as you travel from one section to another. It's not that there is not handicapped access. However, logistically, information that we received indicates that it could take a person 20 minutes or more to get from one place in the building to another because they have to wait for the lift, then they have to go to another lift. And another issue that we'll talk about has to do with a couple of the stairways in the building. Also, handicapped access from outside the building is somewhat limited for students. Okay, and systems in the building, remembering the building was constructed 84 years ago. And so systems in the building, the plumbing is reported to be in need of an upgrade. The HVAC system was replaced and is functioning. The electrical service is outdated. Most of the classrooms have only a couple of outlets. Windows and doors are in need of replacement. There are occasional roof leaks in the gym lobby and in a restroom area, and some of the flooring is in need of upgrade. And the stairs into the cafeteria are very, very steep. I don't know if you folks are all aware of that, but it's a very steep. So what they do is they allow the students to ascend the stairs, but that set of stairs, but not to descend because they view it as an issue. The site is acceptable and operating satisfactorily for the given enrollment. There is probably a need for improvement with regard to student drop-off and pickup in terms of circulating the building. No real issues with traffic, and storage is adequate. Then we have the high school, and again, it was a snowy day. And you can see grades 9 through 12. And then interchangeable classrooms. That's a typo. That should say 64, including the science rooms. And the enrollment, 1366. Constructed in 2001. It's the newest building in the district. This is the way we compute capacity for a high school building as opposed to the method that we use for the elementaries. Because in a high school, the spaces in an elementary, typically when students go to, let's say, music, that is the time when the teacher has the prep period, and the student's room that they've left, their regular classroom, is not utilized. But at a high school, students move from place to place, and the rooms frequently are utilized. And so we do a different capacity analysis to reflect that. So you can see there we have the classrooms, all of them, the regular interchangeables, plus the science labs, plus the art rooms, music, band, chorus, consumer science, the tech, career, ed, and all of them. And as a total, we go to the next page, and you see that the total capacity is 1704, and that reflects our formula, which is to take the 2330, that is the total number of seats, so to speak, that are available, and we use an 0.80 utilization factor. Now, why do we do that? That accommodates for two things. It accommodates for the fact that teachers vacate a particular room during their prep period, and sometimes that room is not full, used while they're at prep, and they actually use their classroom for prep. And the second factor is, as we heard earlier tonight, many schools, and this one in particular, has very, very strong AP programming, very strong world language programming, and oftentimes you only have 15 students signing up for AP Physics. So the district then will run the course, but they are running a course that is below the 25 max. And so we believe the 0.80 compensates for that factor, so that you might be able to have a Spanish 4 or a Spanish 5 classroom with 9, 10, 11 students. And that's what keeps the student body and the school competitive. So those are factors there. Okay. With regard to the high school, we have a few notations in terms of instruction, but generally speaking, across the board with the high school, we found that the classrooms were more than adequate, very satisfactory, and the core facilities, there are actually numerous, there's an auditorium that seats 788 folks, and the lighting and the sound within the auditorium do need an upgrade. There is a full cafeteria, 2 gymnasiums with dividers, so you have 4 teaching stations there, plus you have a weight room, and so there are actually 5 teaching spaces tied in. Bleachers and locker rooms are considered to be in good condition. The library can accommodate up to 4 classes, and administrative space is viewed as adequate. Same is true with support staff, space, and technology. Next year, all students will be equipped with Chromebooks. So there again, this is a real compliment to the district. And ADA Handicapped Access, it is ADA compliant throughout. And the major systems, there is heat inconsistency, especially on the 3rd floor of the building, and that is an issue, especially, well, anytime, but especially as we get to the warmer months. And the rest is generally viewed as satisfactory, and that is true all the way through. The field and play space, the tennis courts and the track are in need of an upgrade, and the practice fields lack adequate irrigation. And this is pretty true in almost all schools. We find there is a lot of difficulty in terms of student drop-off and pickup, and there's congestion, and it is a concern in many school buildings. And storage is generally adequate with the exception of drama and music and some of the athletic equipment. Okay? So now we are about to move to options, and what did we come away with regard to this? And I think this is an important piece, obviously, to look forward and talk in terms of what might be choices that we can make, what things can the district do. Okay. And as we look at the options, it is important to understand that, first of all, the statement of the problem near term In our view, the facilities are generally very well maintained. However, it is important in the near term to implement and fund a capital improvement plan that addresses the infrastructure needs of the aging facilities. Remembering that several of these facilities go back to the 60s, one of them goes back to 1932. So that will be a very important piece down the road. And we're hoping that this discussion and the information you gain from this will help you to prioritize, because you'll be moving toward making some decisions on future building utilization, and that will obviously guide some of your capital needs and budgetary issues. Okay? In the long term, we believe the town needs to implement a plan to gain the most effective use of educational spaces and provide for student needs, space needs, and it needs to upgrade or replace school spaces that do not support 21st century educational programming. Now, we reviewed a number of potential options for resolving space equity and upgrade issues, and among the ones we explored was reassigning grade 8 students to the high school, and then assigning grades 6 and 7 to the Davis Middle School, and closing Wickford and assigning the building to another use. We did not bring that option forward, as we found that in order to, that the capacity at the high school would not accommodate a movement of the full grade 8 to that high school building. And remembering that it is important to maintain a capacity cushion, and we considered that, and based on that analysis, at every year until 24, 25, there would not be excess capacity to handle that. Okay, so we did not bring that forward, and we also did not bring forward reassigning grade 5 students to Davisville and Wickford middle schools and closing an elementary school. That would also not fit in terms of enrollments, number one. But number two, it would be, if it were to be done, then the district would still be dealing with an issue of, let's say that it occurred 2 years from now, the district would still be dealing with an issue of one of the middle schools reaching its 86th year of operation. And so that was a concern. So they were not brought forward. We also considered another possibility. Would it be possible, in the event that pre-K were moved to another location, would it be possible to close an elementary school? And the answer to that was no. So we felt that that was a question that had arisen, and we thought that would not fit. Okay. So let's go to the options. The key point here is the major alternatives that will show you include a bulleted outline description of the option, as well as the listing of advantages and disadvantages. Remember, please, this is important. We have no vested interest in the options that you pick. Okay, so we are looking at them, and we look at them objectively to try to determine what we feel are the advantages and what we think are the challenges that you'll be facing from an educational point of view. Okay, and the key is they will serve, hopefully, as a catalyst for future planning. And it is also important to note that each option does include a capacity cushion, which we believe would accommodate potential future enrollment increases. But it will be up to the community to do an annual tracking in terms to see whether or not, are things moving more quickly or slowly than we are anticipating right now. So option one. Description: construct a new middle school grades 6 through 8, combine Davisville and Wickford middle schools in the new middle school building, convert the Davisville Middle School to a pre-K through 5 elementary school, close Forest Park and Fishing Cove, and reassign the students to the converted Davisville Middle School building. Okay? That's the descriptor of the option. Next. Okay. Part A has to do just with the middle schools. Construct a new middle school, again, as we mentioned, combining Davis and Wickford in that school and closing Wickford. Next. We see the advantages to this as being it takes an 84-year-old instructional facility offline. It eliminates numerous current facility-related instructional issues, including need for the upgrade of the science rooms, no auditorium, no stage in the cafetorium, and a lack of designated spaces for social workers, speech therapists, OT, PT. Also, as you go down to the last bullet, includes an update of the nursing station with a private exam room and adequate capacity. And it would also provide sufficient administrative space for building leadership and admin secretaries, as well as conference and storage space. These are currently inadequate. And the new building would be ADA compliant. That is key. Obviously, anything that is built since 1992-93 has to meet ADA standards, thereby eliminating several current handicapped accessibility issues. It would have a full kitchen, would enable food prep on site. It will eliminate the current Wickford building systems issue related to plumbing, wiring, electrical outlets, outdated windows, and doors, some flooring, and the stairways leading to the cafeteria. So those are major issues, and obviously with those issues, if something does go wrong systems-wide, as everyone knows, making repairs in a building that is 84 years old can become a very, very difficult process because of all kinds of issues that can come up. So that's a key piece. We believe it will improve equity in programming for all Wickford Middle School students. By that, we're referring to science labs, and we're referring to auditorium. Well, does Davisville have an auditorium? No, but a new school would. And also a stage for performances. And we believe it would also strengthen the team model, improved horizontal and vertical teaming between the grades because you'd have them all in the same building. And so the teachers would be able to collaborate much more easily. And we believe that it would be cost-effective with regard to allocation of resources because you'd be able to take advantage of economies of scale. Okay. Next. Okay. And then continued advantages. This would be tied to Davisville. It would provide 21st century facility for Davisville. It would provide an auditorium, which Davisville does not now have. And it would also provide spaces, adequate spaces so that you don't have the conflicting scheduling with the psychologist, social worker. And then we already mentioned team model, improved horizontal, vertical, and cost-effective. Okay, challenges. Well, number one is a big one. Costs associated with the construction of the new middle school. And there would have to be new busing routes for Wickford and Davisville students. And depending on the location of the new facilities, they may be likely to experience increased travel times, possible increase in transportation costs, and issues requiring the replacement of the Davisville windows. No matter what, those windows are the originals and are going to need work.
But did you analyze, depending on the location, for example, piggybacking with the high school routes, that you might actually see a decrease in transportation costs?
There's a possibility. We have the scope of the project did not include the location, but there is a possibility, depending on where it's located, as to whether or not there would be a decrease. That is a possibility. The fact is that in both cases, the students are going to be going to a different location, and how that plays out would be a factor, yes. And so it may be that it might be a savings, but there will definitely have to be a new set of bus routes constructed to take care of it. Okay, and now we go to the elementaries.
So on the elementary side, we have the description, convert Davisville Middle School to a pre-K 5 elementary, close Forest Park and Fishing Cove, and reassign the students to Davisville Middle School building. So for Forest Park, the advantages would be that it would eliminate the need for numerous facility issues, really strategically around the gym and the cafeteria and the auditorium, provide space for appropriate delivery of curriculum and support, resolve some of the Forest Park handicapped accessibility issues, provide sufficient space for administration, and then also provide space for expansion or addition of special ed programming, pre-K and kindergarten as you move forward. Would definitely improve the equity in programming for Forest Park, and again strengthen the team model as teachers have an opportunity to work together in vertical teaming, and the cost-effective allocation of resources. So for a lot of these, you have similar kinds of advantages that are displayed. For Fishing Cove, we would again sort of eliminate some current facility-related issues around the gym, cafeteria, and auditorium. Fishing Cove lacks a community-wide activity space that can't currently be held there, so that would help resolve that issue. Provide, again, appropriate space for delivery of curriculum and support, handicap accessibility, resolves the facility issues around flooring, room dividers, windows, and the increased capacity for an expansion of pre-K. Similar kinds of things in terms of the kinds of things that would be gained in terms of also resolving potential compliance issues if pre-K actually expands. You will run into some issues there. And equity of programming for all Fishing Cove, allocation of resources and teaming. So challenges, obviously, there would be redistricting of students. Transportation time may be increased for both Fishing Cove and Forest Park students. We would need to address Fishing Cove pre-K program in a community, in the configuration and plan for its expansion. The issue of replacement of windows would remain and upgrades would still be needed. And there would be need to fund the reconfiguration of some spaces at Davisville to accommodate pre-K and K and lower elementary needs if you're going into a middle school building.
Okay, we get to option 2, and the description of the option would be to build an addition to the Davisville school, which would include an auditorium, combine Davisville and Wickford middle schools in the Davisville building, close the Wickford middle school, construct a pre-K through 5 elementary school with a 625 student capacity, close Fishing Cove and Forest Park, and reassign the students to the new elementary. And so this is what would be the impact with the middle schools. And you can see that they are almost identical in terms of Wickford, because Wickford would be moving to a building that has been, portion of which has been constructed recently, and it would deal with all of the same issues that we mentioned in the earlier option. Same there. Now, with regard to Davisville, there would be the additional facility addition for Davisville, instructional programming. The addition would include an auditorium, which in middle schools is an important instructional piece, and it would take care of all of the other issues that we mentioned in the last option. And the challenges would obviously be the costs associated with the construction, need for, and need for new transportation and busing routes, most likely. Some possibly for the Davis middle school students, definitely for the Wickford students. There would likely be for Wickford students increased travel time, possibly for some Davis students depending on the new bus routes, possible increase in transportation costs, and I suppose possible decrease, although coming from Wickford to Davisville is probably going to be more costly. Issues requiring the replacement of the windows would remain. Okay, and the elementary?
Okay, go back. Well, maybe it's on this one, so no, go ahead, finish.
So this is the impact on the elementary, and obviously if you're constructing a new building, be closing Fishing Cove and Forest Park and reassigning those students. And really the main advantage, in addition to all the things that were mentioned previously that would be resolved, is that you are building a 21st century instructional facility from the get-go. So you are planning for what you need for now and looking to the future. And again, I think the same advantages for both Forest Park and I think the next Fishing Cove, and for Fishing Cove. Resolves the issues that we mentioned, but also allows you to build a facility that's actually designed for delivering instruction. And obviously the challenges are the same in terms of what we run into with redistricting and transportation and cost.
Okay. So the analysis, we hope, has been of assistance to the school committee and the administration, and we hope that you will be able to move forward with some of these discussions. We hope that we want to make sure that this is understood as a beginning point for study and discussion, and we hope that ultimately there will be a master plan which will deal with the future space utilization issues. And we again wish to thank everyone for all that you have done to help to facilitate the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members have any questions? Ms. McGovern? Or
Go ahead, Sheila. I'll go after you.
I was just wondering, in your experience, from the time a municipality authorizes construction funding, how long is it till a school is ready to be occupied?
It's an extensive process, and it obviously depends on lots of factors, including community support, but it can be a 3 to 5 year time frame.
Just because you use the term students, but it doesn't necessarily mean the students who are there now. And it's
yeah. Students who are in the earlier grades might still be there when changes occur, but certainly the high school students most likely not.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Very in-depth. I'm wondering if you could speak to one of the challenges I'm not sure you addressed with option B, which is the construction of what we would hope would be a state-of-the-art, energy, technology, elementary school, and yet leaving 3 others that are 50 years old. And the sort of challenges that presents as opposed to consolidating into one state-of-the-art middle school where neither party feels like, who would be consolidating to that school, feels like one segment of the population is getting, the brand new shiny toy.
Well, that's an excellent point. Obviously, that particular move creates equity for all of the middle school students. So there is that issue. What we were suggesting was that there is with the elementary alternative. The reasoning behind that primarily was that both of those buildings do have some pretty significant needs, A, and B, neither of them has a gymnasium.
No, I completely agree with the choice of the 2 schools, right, for those reasons. And if you think about the flip side of turning over property back to the town, you'd like to maybe have the property that has some more easy potential alternative uses in that aspect. I'm wondering if you, when you look at other sort of sized high schools, and I don't know if you did this, I look at North Kingstown High School is 7th by enrollment in the state. And if you look at there's 5 other communities. Cranston has 2 high schools. But if you look at the 5 other communities, the ratio of high school to middle school is 1 to 1, except Cranston, which is 1 to 1.5. Well, Kingstown, with 2 middle schools, is a 2 to 1 ratio. In fact, it's pretty hard to find anyone who gets down in that 2 to 1 ratio except South Kingston, which has a 4, 5, 5, 6, so not really 2 true middle schools. So I'm wondering if it's almost the trend where you see a high school that's at 1,400 students to have 2 feeder middle schools. It seems to me incredibly inefficient and outdated by the data from the rest of the state. And if you see that in the communities in Massachusetts where you ever have a high school this size that has 2 smaller feeder middle schools as opposed to the 1 to 1 ratio.
Well, I think ideally, as we moved into some of the research, which talks in terms of, professional learning communities and a great deal of coordination between grade level staff, and then also the articulation from one grade level to the next. Obviously, close proximity helps to promote that type of environment. And so if districts have an opportunity to construct a single school and they are able to accomplish that, then there obviously are some pluses to the environment. And it makes it, as we talk to building principals, they will tell us frequently that, having grade 7, let's say, ELA teachers work together is a major plus. And so that is a factor that does affect
My last question. So I'm looking at the 2 models. I'm looking at the enrollments for the middle schools and elementary schools across the state. It seems to me more prevalent to have a middle school sized at 900 to 1,000 as opposed to an elementary school at 625 in terms of span of control and learning environments. Is that also what you tend to see in Massachusetts and other regional things, that 900 to 1,000 middle school is much more prevalent than a really large elementary school?
That is true. Is that your view, Anna?
I think it varies. I think it varies a lot.
It's rare, I think, that we find certainly the reverse. It's rare that we find a 700 or 800 student elementary school. But we may see them reaching 5, maybe 6. That seems to be
tend not to see 400,
No,
6 to 8 middle of a community this size.
we do. We see a lot because, a lot of the elementary schools.
No, I'm sorry, I'm talking about middle schools.
Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on elementary schools. I'm saying for a community this size with a high school this size, yeah, that seems to be incredibly inefficient economies of scale.
Well, we don't see it frequently.
Thank you.
Mr. Amazato?
Yes, thank you very much. This was really great, extremely comprehensive. I think it's going to be really incredibly useful. I also want to thank the administration because it was maybe 6 months, maybe longer, we started talking about housing starts and that we didn't really know a lot of what was going on. So I think we need to really stay on top of it, and it's good that we're doing this. And planning was very cooperative with that, so that's great. And it's surprising because there's so many more starts than maybe people would have thought. Just in terms of history, I remember we addressed a lot of equity issues in the elementary schools years ago, not all of them. We had plans to put gymnasiums onto some of the schools. We did some and not others, but we did more there than we did. I hear a lot about the equity issue in the middle schools. I mean, I've heard that for years now. They just don't have a lot of space. Wickford does a great job with what they've got, but they just don't have the space to deliver the same kind of programming that they do at Davisville, and that's been a problem. A lot of complaints, a lot of discussion of that for a long, long time.
Right.
So,
With regard to Wickford, we certainly in no way would make any implication that any of that is staff-related. They go
do a great job.
out of their way and have worked tremendously hard to accommodate. And, and so, but it's 84 years old.
Yeah, and it's good to remind ourselves of that, and also, I mean, just that we may not be able to close more schools. That's what we have to, in terms of just close them and take them offline without replacing with another.
Yeah.
Which is something that we've done. We've closed 2 schools in the last 10 years, 2 elementary schools. One of them in kind of in the wrong area of town, but. So I guess this is a great starting point, like you said, and I think we'll look to the administration to hear their recommendations on what we should look at, and we'll have a lot more discussion, and we'll certainly have a lot more public, let the public know what we're thinking about doing, see what the reaction is. It's always disruptive when you redistrict, but I think in the end, I mean, when we redistricted in the past, we changed the delivery of education. We redistricted in terms of splitting up the grades, what they call the pairing model, which was a total different delivery, and much of the research says keeping the grades together results in higher. So this isn't that. This is something that might be temporarily disruptive, but really, in the end, is going to provide a much more better delivery of education. So we have a long way to go. Thank you so much. Excellent report.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
I'd also like to thank you for a very comprehensive report that gives us a whole lot to chew on. I mean, one of the responsibilities of this committee is to do long-term planning to set the stage for future committees years down the road. And as you mentioned and brought up, any planning on any reconfiguration of schools, particularly anything that requires any school construction, has a significant lead time. And the only way that appropriate plans can be made for the future is if we try to do some forecasting, and that's the purpose of this study here. Mr. Jones, did you have another
I did.
question?
I just for sort of the benefit of everyone, I know you weren't able to do the same analysis with our new Davisville Academy building. I don't know if you got to see it at all, or
No, we didn't.
but I mean, given its size, I mean, and its thing, it would be probably an addendum to your option that the pre-K population might not have to move to either New Elementary School or to Davisville, because that's a building that has a lot more capacity than it's being used for now. So I don't know if there's an addendum to things, but I'm just saying that I think it sort of impacts your option that we do have that other space available in the district, and there might be some other advantages to including that as a alternate option, or it was a sub-part of the two you had.
And I also wanted to open up, if anyone in the audience had a question. I know I saw at least one hand go up at one point. Anyone? We have two. So, yeah, if you don't mind, if you could come to the microphone, just so people at home who watch later on could hear. And though I know who you are, if you could do the usuals, please state your name and address that you are so familiar with from your meetings, Mr. Maloney.
Kevin Maloney, 78 Wickham Road. I just had a question on the, if you were to move the two elementary schools over to Davisville Middle School, is that a tight fit, or is there room for extra capacity? And what is that capacity?
It would be a relatively tight fit. Because you are dealing, whereas at Davisville currently, many of your classrooms have 25 student capacity. All right. But when you get into the elementary, or you get into pre-K, or you get into kindergarten, class sizes are much smaller, in the teens and 20. And so therefore, incorporating those students into Davisville takes a significant amount of space in order to keep those class sizes at the level that they are presently. So
Mr. Kennedy, do you mind, could you speak into the microphone a little closer? Just, yeah, because people on the tape can't see.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so I was just saying that incorporating the elementary into Davisville would be tight, but it would work. You would still have the adequate capacity cushion. However, you would not have excess capacity. And one of the reasons for that is that the elementary lower grade class sizes typically range in the 15 with pre-K to 20 with kindergarten, and then your lower grades might go up to 24. You do have a higher limit as far as the upper elementary grades going to 26, but that's not common, and so it would be a relatively tight fit. Would it work? Absolutely. It would work, but would there be additional space? The answer to that, in my view, is there would not be adequate space to bring in additional students beyond the two that we have talked about.
Dr.
Just say as an addendum to that, if we ever get to the point that something like that is being done, my guess is that there would probably be kind of an opening of district lines, and we would be looking at it. It may not be like a clean, all the kids from these two who used to go to these two schools are now going to go to this one. It may be a little more open than that, and there's a little shuffling to make sure that all the schools are at a comfortable capacity at that point.
My only concern with that was if there was extra growth at Quonset,
right.
Other things that 10 years down the road we may, I don't want to box ourselves into a hole and have lost all these buildings and then have no place to put the kids.
Right.
I just want to get an idea. Thank you.
And then,
excuse me, and that's an excellent point. I mean, we've emphasized it a number of times, but it's very important to maintain that capacity cushion so that you are prepared in the event that something unexpected occurs. Our projections and our demographic analysis is based on a number of variables, and as we all know, having looked back a number of years, those variables can change. What we thought was the case in 2013 with regard to housing development has changed significantly. What we thought was the case with regard to housing development in 2005 changed significantly. So it's very important to track current alternatives and current variables.
the next question, if you... And again, if you could just state your name and address, please.
Let's see. Hello, my name is Andrew Kellinger, 42 Rodman Lane. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. It was an excellent presentation and lots of hard work. I kind of like some of the numbers, but do you have any numbers on the what do you call them, baby boomers in North Kingstown as opposed to the United States? That's just one. There's several things that I wanted to go through. And then is there, so in comparing the housing costs and the base tax rate, I noticed that we were taking the bubble into account. And yes, we're going up again, but there's no prediction that we're going to hit that same place. Yes, money has been injected into the economy and everything, so things are, there's more money going around and all that, but I'm sort of concerned with some of that basis of the decision. Yes, the tax base should go up. The other one was that one point that you were bringing up before. Is there any migration correlation that might explain that one tick, or any correlation in that area? The kindergarten versus baby births, right? Yeah, that's what I was after. So some of those things could be leaders, what you're looking for, I think, Mr. Jones. And that's what I was kind of hoping to get at. The options are interesting. Any cost ranges that you can come up with for these option 1, option 2? A wild guess. Okay. Okay, that's fine. It was very interesting and very enlightening. I wanted to thank you very much and thank the committee for this study. This is excellent. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, in response to some of the question, with regard to the boomers, there is a significant boomer population in the community. And the census data that we have indicates that. And that there are also, it appears that that population is remaining in the community. One of the things that boomers have indicated in some studies that have been done, and this makes sense, if you are a boomer and you're thinking of moving, typically you want to move fairly close to where you're currently living if your family, your friends, your grandchildren, your doctors are close by. So what has occurred here? Well, you've got a lot of condominiums, a lot of apartments that are being constructed, and those, we believe, would be very appealing to boomer families who are thinking in terms of, yeah, we would like to maybe, why do we need 4 bedrooms? But do we want to move out of the area? No, in many cases. Some of them do, but many don't. They want to stay next to family, and so therefore, can we make the move out of the 4-bedroom property, and can we remain fairly close to where we are? And the answer to both of those now is yes, you can.
There's actually some data from a June 2014 market economic survey that was done by the town that answers some of your questions in the age demographic and where there's some trends. The trends of the younger crowd and inadequate housing in North Kingstown, sort of the middle crowd, there's adequate, and then the older group is deemed inadequate. And you can probably find that right on the town website. Mm-hmm. It was June 2014 economic market study. I can't remember the group that did it, but that data would give you some of that.
Yep. And other questions that I have not responded to?
Sorry, I think the migratory bit, was there a correlation in the births to the increase in attendance due to migration in and out of certain age groups?
We have not established a correlation along those lines. What we did establish was the fact that clearly the decline in the birth rate was a major factor that for a long period of time affected enrollments. And remember, it occurred when migration into the community was not occurring, was not happening, because the two coincided. It was the early part of the 2000s, and you didn't experience that decline in enrollment until around 2005, decline in births, and then you had a major decline in births coupled with a major decline in people migrating into the community. Now you have a change that is apparent, and that change is, we believe, going to lead to increased enrollments and, most likely, increased births, because you are having younger folks purchasing single-family starter homes.
Okay, thank you. Actually, we've got other things on the agenda, so I want to.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I want to thank you all very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And we're going to take this under advisement for quite a bit of time to come.
Okay.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
So we're going to move on with the remainder of our agenda. Next item up would be citizens' comments. Other than on this presentation, I don't think anyone had signed up. Does anyone want to make any comments who hadn't come to the microphone or something else? Yeah. Okay. I would ask if it not be something else. Okay. Thank you. Is that? Yep.
Again, this is Andrew Kellinger, 42 Rodman Lane. So I represent one of those folks who moved into the township in the last few years. I find it a wonderful place to live. It's been an enhancement to my well-being and my family's well-being, so thank you all for that stewardship. What I wanted to understand and ask your help for is that our neighborhood is a new neighborhood. There's a lot of people who have moved in. There's a school nearby that we would prefer to be districted to. And is there a process to go about to ask for that?
Well, generally in our citizens' comments, we allow you to make any comments that you want. We don't really have a back-and-forth question and answer time. Okay. So, I mean, you're welcome to, state your case. I mean, I can tell you that this purpose of this study is in a long-term, look at the entire district, whether we need to move district lines, whether we need to open new schools, close schools, move things around. So this is the beginning of that process. I mean, redistricting is generally not done very often because it's very disruptive.
So I'm submitting because we're a new neighborhood. Mm-hmm. We're on the end of a line. We're actually a pie cutout of Stony Lane. Mm-hmm. So we're at the end of the Fishing Cove line. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the transportation routes, Fishing Cove would have extended its line to get to us, when Stony Lane actually goes right by our street. We live a mile away from Stony Lane. We live 5 miles away from Fishing Cove. So it's a request based on, parenting and trying to get close to your kids and be there for the daycare and all of that other stuff for those incidentals. It would be an enhancement to our community to be able to go to that school. There were other parents here in the audience who had to leave because the interesting presentation was very thorough. So they asked me to represent the rest of the community.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
I think just for clarification, it's not we're opposed to the discussion. It's the open meeting laws prevent. This is not on our agenda, so we can't. We got to be careful of not violating Open Meetings Act by talking about a topic not on our agenda.
Okay.
That's why citizens' comments are usually one way.
So how would I look at it?
Step one would be what you just did.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I was asked to do that.
Sure. No, absolutely. And that's the purpose of this, is to bring something to the committee's attention.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. So moving on, we have reached our routine items. Number one on the agenda is I'd ask for a motion to seal the executive session minutes of April 26, 2016.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Next, disclosure of executive session votes of April 26, 2016. I can disclose that in executive session, the school committee voted to uphold the recommendation of the superintendent with response to a student discipline matter. The vote was unanimous 4-0. No other votes were taken. We've now reached our consent agenda. Does any members of the committee have, well, before actually I even ask for exemptions, I want to note that the committee the administration has asked me to table item C3, so I'm going to exempt that. Anything else on the consent agenda? Mrs. Avanzato.
B1 and 2, please.
B1 and 2. Anyone else? Hearing none, I would ask if I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda items with the exception of the exempted items, which are B1 and 2 and item C3.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. It passes unanimously. Mrs. Avanzato, you were the first, so B1 and 2, you exempted those items?
I exempted those items because I wasn't present at that meeting, so I would make a motion now to approve those minutes.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve items B1 and 2. All those, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Abstention?
Ms. McGovern?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Aye.
Aye, okay. So that's a yes from myself, Mr. Jones, Mrs. McGovern, and an abstention from Mrs. Avanzato. If I could ask for a motion to table item C3 at the request of the administration.
Table C3.
Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. That has been tabled. So we have approved the consent agenda. And so, moving on, we have unfinished business 2015-2016 school budget.
I don't have anything.
Nothing on that. CIP bond, existing bond, future bond. Just a quick.
Oh, go ahead.
Nothing there, Mr. Jones?
No, I just want to make a quick comment that was, I think asking the question about the time on any new school construction. I think it's also important to remember that we've been in a period of 7 years of expansionary monetary policy and incredibly low interest rates, and my guess is that trend is not going to remain forever. And so the cost of borrowing, the financial stability of the town notwithstanding, if I was a betting man, I would say things are going to be only costly from an interest rate perspective in the future.
Okay, thank you. Next, we've reached policies. I'd like to kick this one off one more week to work on it. So I'd ask if we could have a motion to table item C1, which is the school committee meeting policy. If I could have a motion to table that.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Next, we have a amendment to our health and wellness policy, which is policy JL and JL/GBGC. This is not a new policy. It is a change to an existing policy, so that can be approved this evening. So I'd ask a motion to approve item C2. Any second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mrs. Avanzato.
Could I just very, very briefly ask Michelle if she wouldn't mind outlining just more important changes in that, just very briefly.
Well, the policy is actually it's just about rewritten, honestly, Linda. And we took several models that are being used around the state, and then we divided them into a general policy and then a regulations policy. So it's pretty comprehensive between the two policies, and it incorporates all the regulations from the state and the federal government.
Thank you very much. And that basically, the item 2, and we're on item 2 now, but item 2 and 3, they go together. It's the policy and the regulations that accompany them.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, items like this, 2 and 3, health and wellness is the work of a lot of people in subcommittee meetings and all that, which I took no part in. So I extend my gratitude to those who take the time to, because it's an important issue in policy, those who take the time to work on.
And they've been really working on this for a long time.
Of policies.
Total rewrite, yeah.
So we have a motion and a second, I think, right? We had a motion and a second on that? Sorry, lost my train of thought there for a second. So any further discussion? All those in favor of approving item C2?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Next, we have item C3, which is the health and wellness regulations, which accompany that policy, JL/GBC-R. If I could have a motion to approve item C3. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next is item D, which is the 2016-2017 school budget and the approval of the Meritorious Budget Award Package. Mrs. King, this is definitely your purview. Before we do that, I meant to do this before. I want to thank you very much because I know you work very closely with the NESDAQ survey as well as members of your team while they did a lot of heavy lifting, I know that a lot of the information came through your office and from your staff, and I want to thank you very much for the efforts I know that you put into
I
that.
appreciate that. It was a very good experience. I think it was a great report, and I do hope that we really use the information in that report to really build a good capital plan going forward that the schools and the town so desperately need. So this item is the approval of the Meritorious Budget Award format. Clearly, this format will be updated with whatever the actual numbers are. We did this in the same time frame last year, so this would be for the FY17 submittal, and I just want to remind everyone that we did win the Meritorious Budget Award for the current year budget, FY16. It was the first year that we submitted, and we won in that first year, which was amazing. Kudos again to Steve Janelle, our controller. He's the one who's done the majority of the work on this. But it's the same package. We've added some other items, and basically we ask for your format approval now, and then when the final numbers come in, we update it and send it along to the committee.
Thank you. I have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mrs. Evans?
I just want to say thank you to Mary and to Steve Janelle because you just transformed this whole process and make our jobs very much easier. Phil's job, too.
Any other discussion?
I appreciate you too, Mary.
Sure.
Hearing none, all those in favor of approving item D1?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We have no new business. We have some reports in the packet for enrollment and a disposal notification. Any members have any comments or questions on those items? Without that, we've reached the end of our agenda, so I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you all.